Greetings, my friend. Welcome to the secret shop.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Secret Shop podcast. I am Neon, and I am joined by my regular co-hosts, Cymen. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for asking.
Really well. Very good to hear that. And then, Anchor, I understand that you're not doing quite as well as Cymen is right now.
Yeah, I caught a cold, so yeah, all my orifices are leaking.
Got a case of the nasal goo, as they say in the business. But hopefully that will come on to the track too much, but we'll do our best to edit around it. But it's lovely to have you guys. One thing to mention off the top, if people didn't have a chance to check it out, I did an interview with Dabacabb, who is one of the content creator for YouTube. He does Fortnite and Overwatch videos and has recently started doing artifacts videos, trying to get really involved in that, and it's really exciting to see that. Did an interview yesterday talking about his experience going to PAX, talking about the decks that he played there and what his thoughts were about each of them, and you got some interesting thoughts generally about being a content creator and such as well.
Some of you may remember Dabacabb as the first one to appear on stream to challenge one of the champions. He was actually the slayer of the White Dragon, Luminous Inverse. Really great stuff from our buddy.
Yeah, and then he's been collaborating with us a bunch. I did this interview with me, of course. Did a video with Anger just today as well that came out, and got his own stuff going on too. So check all of that out. So to begin with, for our startup question, I actually got one from the audience last time. Mindless was asking us about the artwork that we liked. They said that their favorite so far of what they've seen is the Vicious Nasal Goo, which is a lovely, delicious artwork that we got as Bristleback's signature card. And I actually think this would be a great regular segment. If you are a listener and you want to ask us a question, it doesn't have to be about Artifact even, to ask us to start the show, this would be a great place to begin. So my favorite so far is Skywrath's Mage signature card, which is the Mystic Flare. I think this one's a lot of fun. Get a nice vantage from behind him. I just think the Skywrath Mage is bitchin' altogether. So part of the reason that I like it, and just has this big fat explosion going off in front of him. So that's the one that I would choose as personal favorite myself. Eclipse is a close second, I think, but I probably have to say Mystic Flare is my favorite right now.
I actually, I really like Duel, the new Duel card, because like compositionally, if that is even a word, like the way the artwork is built up is so good. It's so dramatic, and it features both Legion Commander and Sorla Khan, so there's so much lore going on, and also because it's one of my favorite cards mechanically. So I think I would have to go with Duel.
I definitely see where you're coming from there. Like, the expression on Trestin's face on that card is amazing. The whole thing just looks very climactic. Like, that card could very well depict like one of the final confrontations within the story. It looks that good.
What about you, Cymen? Do you have a favorite art?
I have a couple, if that counts. Sure. First of all, I really love Better Late Than Never.
Oh yeah, that's a cute one.
It is. Yeah, it is a cute one. I'm sure you'll put it up on YouTube, but for the audio listeners, Better Late Than Never is a blue 3-mana card which summons a melee creep into any lane. So this is actually one of the spells that you can play from any lane into any lane, as long as you have a blue hero present there, and it summons a creep into that lane. But what I love about it is the title and the artwork, because on the art we can see a radiant creep basically struggling to get into battle because he stood up too late. This is full anime. Only thing that's missing is the burnt toast in his mouth, trying to get out there into battle to get slaughtered, probably for a measly 1 gold. I absolutely love that one.
Oh, and I think another honorable mention I want to point out is also Ursa's signature card. It has really good art, like just compositionally how it's built up.
Yeah,
and
and Rage, correct?
Yeah, and Rage. Yeah, and Take Aim, where Windrunner is shooting the Hellbearer Smasher. I also really like those, just because of the composition.
Turns out there are a lot of good art on the cards. Definitely, I will agree with that for sure. So with that, let's we get into talking about the actual first topic that we actually wanted to talk about was Tabletop Simulator Artifact. And the reason why is because for, I know maybe there are a couple of you who are listeners who are actually in the closed beta already, but for the majority of us plebs, we don't get a chance to play Artifact. And the best way to do it is do it through Tabletop Simulator. This is a game that you can get through the Steam Workshop. And how about Anger? You are the one who among us who is the biggest advocate and the most enthusiastic about playing it. Can you explain to people just like how you get it, how it works, and just the technical side of getting into TTS Artifact?
Yeah, it's pretty simple actually, because the guy who made it did a really good job in just making it really simple and easy, or as easy as you can.
It really isn't simple. Don't understand.
As simple as possible. I will go on about this a little bit, but like it is not easy to use. He did a wonderful job trying to do it. It's still clunky as fuck.
But you go to the Steam Workshop for Tabletop Simulator. It's a game you need to have on Steam. I think it's $20 or something.
Yeah.
And then you download in the Steam Workshop Artifact, and you just make a game in Artifact or in Tabletop Simulator, and you boot up Artifact, and then you just like all the cards are there. You have neutral creeps and the laning cards and everything. The only problem is you have to do everything manually. So every time something happens randomly, you have to throw a die. And every time things are placed around, you have to copy and paste the creep card. And you have to just and all calculations from damage and stuff, you have to calculate it in your mind. And so but I think it's very complicated, and it's a lot to keep track of and remember. But I think it might be a good thing, because it makes it so that you actually have to remember all of these things. You have to know the game in and out to actually play it. But in normal Artifact, everything just happens, automatically. Yeah. So I think, hopefully it has some value at all. Because a tabletop sim game takes at least an hour, whereas a normal one would take 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I hope it's not a complete waste of time, but it's so much fun, and you almost forget how much time it takes.
Yeah. The great strength of Tabletop Simulator as a game in itself is that you do get this physical aspect of board games, because you do have to move every single piece yourself, and it has this whole physics engine going on. So it is actually very nice to play with people over the internet that you can't really get together at a real life table. It's a really great game. You can simulate a bunch of stuff on it. But coming back to Artifact, I thought that it was actually pretty amazing how doable it still is in this environment. Like, it is clunky and it is difficult, and it takes a long time to do anything, because you move everything by hand, you do the calculations in your head, and you put every debuff on the card yourself, etc., and you pass initiative by passing a little figure between the two of you. However, you can definitely feel how this game started out as a paper prototype together with Garfield at Valve, which is what they talked about. Like, that's really where the roots of the game lies. And Garfield just wanted to make a game that is still more complex than a board game, and because he feels that that's pretty much the point of having it in the digital world rather than paper and board game stuff.
Yeah, and I would agree with all of that. I think that like tabletop sim is great, and there's a lot of like, yes, it is difficult to use, but the thing about it that I think is important is it gives you an experience of playing the game, and there's something about actually using the cards and seeing how they play out that changes your evaluation of them. Like until you actually you can kind of like see something whatever card it is. Let's say Skywrath Mage, just as an arbitrary thing. It's like, okay, I was discussing in the last cast, like, okay, this is the play pattern that I think it'll follow. You play it out on the second turn. You use the concussive shot. You try to pair the concussive shot with the Mystic Flare ability, and that's how you get the how the card is going to play out. But that's not exactly you don't know that until you're actually playing the card. Like when you actually get a chance to experience what the game plays out like, I actually feel that it changes your evaluation of a lot of stuff pretty quickly. So I felt that was something I really enjoyed about the experience, and there was a lot of the cards that really come from that we're going to talk about today. That kind of part of the reason that I wanted to talk about them now was because after playing a couple of games on it, my evaluations changed pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest eye openers for me was just simply pacing of the game, like how long a game takes, how many rounds there is in a game, because especially as a content creator, when I talk about cards and creatures and everything in the game, the mechanics, like before actually playing it in TTS, it was kind of hard to imagine how to actually implement these cards in the actual game and how to actually understand them. But now that I've played it, like some cards I thought were crap before, I see are now actually really good. I mean, I still think the Keenfolk Musket is crap. Yes. but for example, Red Mist Pillager, we're going to come back to that later, and I can probably finish talking about it then, but or why I think it's so good now, but it's for more than just one reason. There's like a handful of reasons for why Red Mist Pillager is one of the best cards in the game.
Yeah, and I think one aspect of actually playing the game versus just watching it is initiative. I think that is the big mechanic of passing the turn or keeping initiative for the next board, or trying to just do your stuff on the current board that really did not translate before from just watching it. You really do have to have some playing experience to grasp how important it is to the entire strategy of every round and every phase of the game to either keep initiative or do mind games in order to do whatever you want on the current board.
And also it should be mentioned that like in some of our evaluations of these cards, it's based around what's currently available now too, because we can only really base on what we have. Because like for instance, it's something like the Red Mist Pillager card. There may be some cards that are available in the game that are not available to us right now that we don't have access to, and that effectively counter that. So we're sort of basing our evaluations of these cards for the time being. So that's just a caveat that I'll say, which kind of goes back to all of our evaluations of all cards. But as we get new cards, it's going to influence things. Because like another one that I've heard is that there's going to be a lot more hero kill available cards in the actual game, which will mean that beefy heroes like something like Bristleback, which a lot of people think is really, really powerful, might not be as dominant in the actual game itself because there are better ways to counter just one big idiot.
Yeah, and improvement cards too are going to be easier to get rid of, because now we only have 2 counters to improvements, but there is more in the actual game.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting how the 4 pack stacks were designed, and because they were very clearly geared towards new players. None of them were too complicated, and they still had very clear identity even to new players and experienced TCG players as well. And they still had limited options. However, there were still so many combinations that were unexpected, and they were very much designed to play against each other. I don't know how much experience you guys have with Magic the Gathering, but there are some sets, some versions of the game, so to say, which are just 2 decks that are made to be playing against each other again and again in a duel. And I felt like there was something like that going on here with these 4 decks that were clearly designed not only to introduce people to the game, but that were fairly balanced. Like there was no clear winner, in my opinion. There's been discussion about this, some debate, but in my opinion, there wasn't like a clear winner among the 4 decks. I think we've seen most of them win at some point.
So with that, the main topic that I wanted to talk about over the course of the episode was around 2 types of cards and what our impressions are about these types of cards and the cards that fall under these types, which is items and the creatures or the creeps. Items first. This is the a section of cards that I really didn't know what I thought about them exactly, or like how to evaluate them when I was first starting to play the game, or when I was first like learning about the game, because it's a very different resource system. Like gold is an entirely separate resource from your mana and cards. So it was really interesting to finally play TTS Artifact and actually learn a little bit about how they play out. There are, of course, 3 classes of item cards. The first are the consumables, which there's 4 different versions of them. There's the Fountain Flask, which heals a unit fully, Healing Salve, which heals a unit by 6, the Potion of Knowledge, which draws you a card, and then the Town Portal Scroll. These are all the ones that show up in the rightmost section of the shop. Then you have an item deck of cards that is at least 9 items that you build yourself from the items that you have in your collections. And then finally, you have the secret shop pile, which gives you a random item from all of the items that are available in the game. And so this is the composition of what you get in the shopping phase and what the items that you have access to. But we're going to talk a little bit about them and what our thoughts are on some of these different types of cards now that we've had a bit more experience with the game. And I want to start with the consumables. So the 2 that I was, it makes sense to begin with in my mind are Healing Salve and the Fountain Flask, which are, of course, the 2 healing potions, one of which costs 4, which is the Fountain Flask, and then one of which costs 3, which is the Healing Salve that heals by 6. So what are your impressions about these cards now after playing the game a little bit? Let's start with Cymen.
Honestly, I've always tried to save up my money for other cards. However, I think to me, the most valuable one currently is the Teleport Scroll, because it allows you to pull a hero out of the board back into your fountain before combat occurs. So it does skip combat. It will skip the entire rest of the round, but you do fully heal that hero and you get to redeploy it. And something that we have seen at PAX is that some people will even go so far as to kill their own hero just to be able to redeploy it again the next round. So to me, that is a very valuable thing to do. However, some of the beta testers already said that new players do overvalue TP Scroll as well. And that sometimes it's just good to let your hero die instead of wasting the gold on TP Scroll just to get it back. But I do see the value there. I think that it's really good to save your hero and basically save one round of it not being available at all.
I think it's very the healing potions are very interesting because for example, Control and Blue, people have to plan ahead a lot. Like they will think many turns ahead, and I think then it's good if you're playing, like I mostly play Red and Red Black in TTS, and there I actually value cheaper items. I don't save up that much for really expensive items, and for example, then just healing one of your super tanky heroes to maybe fuck up the Control player's plan. But also, like Cymen said, the TP Scroll is really good, and also the Potion of Knowledge to draw a card, because with at least with Red, I try to have as many low mana cost cards as possible and get them out early. And a lot of the times I find myself with not that many cards on my hand, so then the Potion of Knowledge is good to have. So I can make sure I get the Berserker's Call or Duel.
One of the things that I was thinking about is that these cards definitely seem to fluctuate in their value in different decks. One of the things that struck me playing yesterday is I was usually playing with a lot of different kinds of. Well, one of them was a blue deck, for instance, a blue-red deck that I was messing around with, and I realized that the healing potions didn't actually seem that good to me on most of my heroes because, for example, a lot of them just get one-shot. So like having a healing flask or whatever, like what am I healing? When it's just dying when I first play it out. So that was something that I was noticing, that especially when you're behind, it really felt like these healing potions were. Both versions of it, the healing salve and the fountain flask, were not very good, and that you could all, like, there was a couple of times that I bought them just because I was like, okay, I have gold available, so I'm going to buy it because just to see what happens, and I just never had an opportunity to play it.
I think it was Dabacabb who told me, or said maybe he told you on your podcast, I can't remember, but I think it was he who said that. If like, for example, buying a healing salve or just being on the defense all the time is only prolonging the inevitable, but it's not going to be the thing that allows you to win. But for a red deck, being tanky and having full HP on your heroes might be what will allow you to win, whereas with blue, you are just wasting money on trying to stay alive when that's not what you should be doing.
Very much the game plan of blue decks, at least most of the time, is that now and then you will have to give up a tower pretty early and just trust in the fact that you have a late game geared deck and that you will come back as long as you defend the other towers until that happens.
That's actually something to mention that's like off the top right now, is that it seemed like almost every game you lose a tower. That's really common to have happen. And it's usually correct too, because it's like, even if you're ahead, your opponent's sort of, trying to like push you in one of the lanes. You're like, okay, well, I'll just overcommit into the other two and kill you. I'll take down the two in the time that takes you to take down one. So that's something that is a really interesting element of the game. And there's no question that I know that I am thinking a lot about it. I'm going to probably end up writing about and making videos about hero positioning and lane prioritization, because these are very deep concepts that I haven't yet processed enough to really talk about them intelligently. But
we will need much more experience to really judge some of these things, especially because I did not expect that the Ancient itself would be such a bullet sponge in a way. Like, it has twice the health of a normal tower, and even if they took down the tower of that lane fairly early, unless they have totally flooded the board, you will be able to defend the Ancients fairly easily. And we have seen many players deciding to leave the lane of the Ancient to take down one of the towers instead, because that's so much easier. We have seen plenty of games, at least a couple, perhaps not plenty, where they did commit more to the Ancient to get that quick win in, but that certainly didn't work most of the time. Like, they often switched lanes to be more efficient with their attacks.
Yeah, but yesterday when we played, did you win when you were trying to take down the Ancient? I can't remember, because you won one and I won one. Which one did you win?
I won one by killing an Ancient. The thing that I would say, in response to Cymen's statement, is the only way to take down an Ancient that I've seen is, like, you actually have to sort of have your deck built in such a way that you can do it, or playing in such a way that you can do it. You have to mean it. You can't really do it. Like, taking down a tower, you kind of can take it sort of by accident almost. It seems like just through good positioning and good play and a couple of efficient trades, you can take a tower. Taking an Ancient, you are you have to think about it not as 80 HP. You have to think about it as 120 HP. So when you think about it that way, you realize how big of an ask it is to climb all the way through all of that health.
Yeah, it really is just you're 1/3 of the way there if you're focusing on one lane.
So the way that I was able to take it, it was actually a lane that I had 2 Emissary of the Quorum, a Lycan, 2 Savage Wolves in it. But it was something that it was like this lane that it was a blue-green deck that I was playing, and it was the last lane, and I had my Lycan there. It was the only hero that I had there, and I just kind of like every time I would get there, I was like, okay, I have a spare creep in my hands that I can play, so I'm just going to play it out because I can't deploy it efficiently anywhere else, so I may as well do it. And then all of these different creeps, just the abilities that they had, what allowed them to really multiply in their power. The other card that is there are a couple other cards that are efficient for taking ancients that we've seen so far. Red Mist Pillager, this obviously has a multiplicative effect in its damage and exponential damage that it does. So yeah, I can take a ancient after just a couple of turns if it's left unchecked, and then the assault ladders / Disciple of Nevermore kind of combo with something like Dimensional Portal. So you like when you have these kinds of cards and you're playing these kinds of cards, those can take an ancient, but normal gameplay tends not to. And there were a lot of games where you would have like 3 creeps and an axe in a lane, and they would just be doing like whatever was 15 a turn, and that's still like 4 turns or something like this, which is a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's enough about those. Getting into this tangent about ancients, which I think is really interesting. Hopefully that people enjoyed that.
Yeah, perhaps one more point about the consumables, in particular the healing potions. We did see a lot of stuff where one player would try to get a hero down to a certain value so they could kill them either in the combat phase or using one of their spells, especially Thunder God's Wrath. They were talking a lot about how to set that up for a multi-kill. And these healing potions can really throw a wrench into that sort of plan. By just healing a hero either by 6 or fully, that can turn an entire lane, really. But again, very situational. So it really depends on the deck whether or not those healing potions will have a big impact or none at all.
Yeah, and that's something that also goes back to this idea of initiative being so important. Is if you're the player that has the healing potion and the hero at 4 life, then you can counter the Thunder God's Wrath at least partly. And if you're the blue player and you're the one who has the initiative, then you are not punished by it. So that's so important.
Yeah, especially with those board clearing spells.
Yeah. So let's actually move on to another trio, like a little package of items that we've seen so far that I actually think is worth shouting out. And that is the Stonehall Pike, the Stonehall Plate, and the Stonehall Cloak. These are items that each give a stat bonus of either attack, armor, or health, and then give a subsequent bonus to your hero every turn afterwards, after the combat phase. These are cards that have really impressed me. And I almost feel like when you're starting out, a item deck that is just 3 pikes, 3 cloaks, 3 armor would probably be like pretty good most of the time. And then as you're sort of building from there, you can variation, assuming that you don't have any like big economy kind of stuff. Like if you're not a payday deck, that just seems like a really solid base for a lot of items decks, because they're efficient. They cost 6, and 5 are what they end up costing. They give very reasonable stat bonuses to begin with, and especially if you get them out in a couple early turns of the game, they're excellent.
I totally agree. I think it was Action Slacks who kept repeating this on stream, and he's definitely on your side. He kept saying that if something has the Stonehall brand, so to say, you better purchase it. Because all of these items, Stonehall Plate is 6 gold, Stonehall Pike is 6 gold, and the cloak is even only 5 gold. That means all 3 of these items are reasonable purchases after the first round. As long as you manage to kill 1 hero and 1 creep, or even just 1 hero, you can buy any of these 3 items. And they are amazing early game, and they just keep getting better. And they will be able to carry you over into the mid game at least, if not the late game.
I think one important thing with the Stonehall weapons is I think they're much more viable on red heroes and maybe black heroes than, for example, blue and green, because blue and green heroes die much more than red heroes.
Sure.
Red heroes will usually stay in their lanes for a long time if you take care of them, so they will always get the bonus. Whereas someone like a Skyreth Mage or an Earthshaker can quickly be just one-shotted. So I think they're really good for a red deck or a red combo deck, where one, you will often kill a hero the first round, so you have enough gold to actually buy them. And early game in general, you are so on top and get so much gold, so you can buy them and use them. But on blue, I don't know, if I was gonna play a late game deck, I don't think I would value them as highly. But
it really
I don't know what you think.
Yeah, it really depends on how well you can keep these heroes alive after you.
Well, like, I mean, I don't even think that it's that big of an ask, though, because it's something that just +2 attack, you're just like, okay, well, maybe I don't get the bonus after combat, but I can trade. And then if it does survive somehow, maybe especially the pike, I think the pike is the one that I would point to that you probably wouldn't want to include as a default in the blue decks. I would actually probably say Blink Dagger is the one that I would choose there as being more reasonable. But the 2 defensive ones are quite useful because it can also help you survive through a hit of a big unit like an axe or whatever. So it does have, but they're not obviously perfect. They have their issues. They're not. I don't think that every competitive deck is going to start with all of those and that's just going to be it. I just think that these are a good place to be in with, especially if you don't know how to build your items decks. The other thing that I would actually going to say is, and this is actually something I learned very quickly in my games against Anger yesterday, because she was playing these aggressive decks and I was playing much more defensive decks, is that these, go figure. But there's a lot of times that after a and also like the way in which it works in the TTS artifact is you have to tell people like, well, how many item cards did you buy? How much gold did you spend or whatever? Now, she would be consistently getting more gold than me because she was actually killing my stuff pretty efficiently. But it would be after the shopping phase, and she'd be like, yeah, spend some gold. I bought 4 items, and I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? 4 items? Jesus. Was there a special sale on? Was it clearance sale? Yeah. So, but the thing is, though, is if you don't have enough money to buy the thing that's available in the shop, then you buy nothing. If you have more money, then you can buy 2 things or 3 things or 4 things. Clearly, Apotheosis Blade is much stronger and much more impactful than a Stone Hall Pike.
Yeah.
How much better is it than 3 Stone Hall Pikes and 2 Stone Hall Cloaks? It's probably still better, but not like a ton better. And you get the much larger flexibility though in that 5 items, because if you have 10, you can buy 2. If you have 12, you can buy 2. You have all of these increments in between, and you don't get into these situations where you're like, man, I got my 20 gold, I'm going to buy something sweet, and then the 25 gold item pops up for you, and then you're just like, well, I guess I have to buy a town portal scroll or something like this, or just buy nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did see a couple games where the rotations of the shop really dictated how the game was going to shift throughout the next round.
Yeah, that's for sure. Also, so next, I want to talk about Poaching Knife. This is an 8-cost rare weapon that gives the equipped hero +2 attack and has the passive ability that you get 5 gold after an enemy hero dies and get 1 gold after an enemy creep dies. So this functionally gives you double gold when your opponent's stuff dies. And when you think about it, like the short sword, which is one of the most basic items, this is a 3-cost weapon that gives +2 attack, and that costs 3. So this costs 8, meaning that's 5 more, but you get that money back the first hero that you kill, which when you think about it that way, you're like, wow, this is really powerful.
It ramps up quickly, I'd say. However, for some reason, we didn't actually see that many people go for it. There were a couple players who went for like 2 right away because they were playing the ramp deck and they wanted to make that money. But I personally like this item a lot. I think that this can get absolutely out of control if you are an aggressive player. That's the thing. Basically, you're buying this, hoping to double your gold if you're aggressive enough. I mean, creeps should be dying anyways from every other combat, etc. So there will be some extra gold coming your way. But what you're really looking for with the Poaching Knife is hero kills. Like, you really want hero kills in that lane. And that's where it comes in. This is basically an item which is also all about lane positioning, not only picking which hero it is.
Anger, I know that you've played this in some of your decks. Has this impressed you? Is this something that you are expecting to see a good deal of play?
I don't know. I've tried it out a little bit to see if it's viable, but and it is really good once you get it for the first time. It's 8 gold, I believe, and you place it in the right lane and you get double gold for it, especially in really aggressive decks. It can be really good because, as you said, you get the value back quickly. But I haven't made up my mind yet if it's worth it compared to getting a more aggressive item that early in the more aggressive decks. Like, I think, okay, and for example, my red-black deck, it's really good because there the point is to kill a lot of heroes and get a lot of gold otherwise. So you get both hero kills and gold from other things. So there it's good. But in my mono red deck, I don't use it because there I'd rather get, for example, the Stonehall items and the Red Mist Mall and yeah.
Well, that's a good transition then. How about you talk to us about the Red Mist Mall?
It's really good because...
So what does it do? Just to read the card first.
Oh, yeah. It gives... or I don't have the card in front of me, but it gives 5 siege damage. And how much normal damage does it give?
2.
Extra attack? 2, yeah. But the siege damage is really important because I mostly like to play where I don't really summon that many creeps. I just buff up my heroes. And then sometimes what happens is your heroes get cock-blocked a lot by creeps from the enemy. So they can never actually hit the tower, you know?
Yeah, they can't penetrate.
So then if you have the Red Mist Maul, suddenly they can't block that damage. But it costs 10 gold. So just like with the Poaching Knife, I haven't made up my mind yet if it's worth it to pay that much for the item instead of just getting... or trying to open a way with Jewel, for example, in Berserker Call, and then spending more money on an item that gives you more attack. So it's definitely good, but... And for example, yesterday, the game I lost versus you, I'm pretty sure I would have won if I hadn't discarded the Red Mist Maul when using coup de grace.
Yeah, no.
But, so yeah, it's good.
I personally like this item simply because it is so objective focused. Like, it gives you a measly 2 attack damage to a hero, like base, but where it really comes in neat is when you are blocked all over. And we did see that a couple times in the streamed games, where a tower would be like 5 or 4 health away, but the enemy had, of course, ramped up their defense, and there were so many high health creeps and heroes in front just trying to hang on to that last tower. But the Red Mist Maul would come in and just destroy that tower, even from a blocked line. I think it is very high value in those situations. But we really got to keep it. The thing is that it's really only good when you are blocked.
Yeah.
Because siege damage is not applied when you get to hit the tower directly, if I remember correctly.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Or is it?
I'm not sure.
No, it only applies if you're blocked.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
That's why it's so situational. It's for breaking down those walls, which is why this card art is so wonderfully thematic.
Yeah. And it is definitely a card, though, that I think it has a place in certain styles of aggressive deck. And it just also, I think, highlights the potential power of Siege, which has some really powerful situational applications. Another card that has, I think, situational powerful applications is the Wingfall Hammer. This is one that we talked about on a previous cast, but I have some more opinions on it now that I've had a bit more of a chance to play with the TTS artifact. This is the one that gives an equipped hero +4 attack, active 1, give equipped hero and its allied neighbors +X regeneration this round, where X is half its attack. This is a card that I feel like it costs a lot. is a good way to put it. Like 19, I realize now how large 19 is, and
yeah, it's up there,
and how like healing in general, especially in the late game, healing I think is particularly good in the early game, which is in some ways like Dota, like you have these consumable items in the early game that you use a lot more in the first couple minutes during the laning phase, that you can stay in the lane longer and you don't die, and you can continue to farm creeps, etc. But in the late game, they kind of drop off in the efficiency because they are just not effective enough, and the way the team fights end up working, like they don't have an impact. I think that's very true about artifact as well. And so the fact that this gives you healing in a certain way, or like a kind of a pseudo armor as well in a way, which is how regeneration works, it's hard to get your money's worth from this one, and I kind of would rather have a item that has some other impact in terms of repositioning or condemning improvements or something like this in order to greater disrupt my opponent's plans.
Yeah, for example, Vesture of the Tyrant, which is also... Oh, it's the next one.
No, go ahead with it. I think this is a really good transition.
Okay. Okay, Vesture of the Tyrant is also 19 gold. It gives your hero, the equipped hero, and the tower 3 armor. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have a cooldown. It's always there. And with 3 armor to your hero, that means no creep can get through. A lot of the shitty blue and green heroes can't get through. And your tower with 3 armor, that's so fucking good. And on top of that, they also get rapid deployment. Like, Vesture of the Tyrant is so superior to Wingfall Hammer, in my opinion. But I've used Vesture of the Tyrant a lot in TTS. I've never used Wingfall Hammer, so that's only by intuition. I can't speak with actual experience with the item, but to me it seems super weak in comparison.
I think both of these items are supposed to fill out a similar role. Both of these items are defensive, but one of them protects your tower as well as the hero, while Wingfall Hammer is supposed to protect several units at once, especially your most powerful ones, because the regeneration that the equipped hero and its neighbors gain is based on the attack damage. So the implication here is that Wingfall Hammer is for protecting your most powerful heroes and creeps. Basically, regeneration, as just a quick reminder for those who may not have listened last time, regeneration happens at the same time as combat damage. So you can completely out-heal any damage that is being dealt to you at the same time. And this means that high damage heroes or creeps, let's just say Reftel Convoy. We've seen some crazy attack numbers on Reftel Convoy. Imagine if half of that damage was regeneration. And remember that Reftel Convoy actually starts with 20 health. And you will see that a Wingfall Hammer buff on that creature, on that unit, even if it only lasts for one round, one combat, is amazing. Like, it can totally save your lane if you keep your blocking units alive. Or maybe you want to keep that unit alive so you can deal more siege damage next round. So the question really is, when you have a choice between Wingfall Hammer and Vesture of the Tyrant, was it?
Yeah, I choose rapid deployment because that's such a fucking amazing mechanic.
Yeah, it is, but rapid deployment is mostly for either aggression or, let's say, aggressive defense, where you basically hop from lane to lane, if you die, to defend your towers. And that's really what Vesture of the Tyrant is all about. It's about redeploying defensive measures, most of all. While Wingfall Hammer is more about maintaining your line.
Yeah, but rapid deployment is good in almost any situation. It's not just aggressively defensively or whatever. It's good for positioning. It's good for objectives. It's good for anything. It's like lately I've realized that the hero deployment phase is the most important phase, and therefore the TP scroll and rapid deployment are possibly two of the most powerful mechanics in the game.
Yeah.
Like, Rix is so weak, but he's so strong because, like, Dabacabb really red-pilled me on Rix. I thought he was crap, but the rapid deployment is so fucking good.
I see that, but we also have to keep in mind that Wingfall Hammer actually only has a cooldown of 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
So the only thing that the cooldown really prevents is to somehow reposition a hero into another lane to do the same thing. So that's the only thing that the active cooldown prevents, because you will be able to use it every round once.
No, there's a 1 round cooldown, so you can only use it every other round.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's something that I want to double check at some point, but we can leave that there. The one that I would actually just conclude that back and forth, and I think this is a good debate to have. What are these cards is better in which deck and why? But I personally think that the 3 tower armor definitely bought Anger a couple of turns in the games that we played. And that was something that really impressed me. So we'll have to see, though, how that plays out. But how about we move on to talk quickly about Apotheosis Blade, which is one that people have been talking about as one of the more powerful items in the game, which, of course, I'll just read it all out because, I mean, it's a short novel, I understand, but I'll read it out nonetheless. So it's 25, it's rare. Equipped hero has +8 attack and +4 siege. Condemned units. Equipped hero deals damage, battle damage 2. And then active 1, condemn enemy improvements. Condemn each item equipped to equipped heroes combat target. Okay, this does a lot of things, and the most important one of the things that it does, actually, in my opinion, is that active ability, which is killing, it kills all the improvements and all of the items, which can really reset a lot of hard work that your opponent put together, and makes this card really fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm. And I think another interesting thing is whoever it attacks is condemned. So if you put it on a really weak blue hero and it attacks a super beefy red hero, that hero will be condemned.
Yeah, it's basically a touch of death mechanic.
And I think, I hear people talk about the active, but I haven't really heard people talk that much about just the passive of the card, which is so strong.
True.
Yeah, I think that the idea of the passive is that in a lot of the times it is going to be killing your opponent's stuff anyway. Like if you give your hero plus 8 attack most of the time, it's going to be has enough attack to kill something. Now, I understand that if your opponent Time of Triumphs their stuff or they like buffs it under control, yeah, it won't die to it, but it just feels like, you know, it's just almost like it's too much that it's going to it's redundant because it has so much attack at that point. Now, I definitely agree though that it is meaningful text in a lot of applications, but the idea though to me that it can reset your opponent's items as well makes that so much harder too, because if they have, like, let's say they have like the plus 16 health, like whatever hero, a cloak, and then you condemn that, like, I mean, you're obviously going to kill it now. Well, what hero survives that attack now once they have all of their items removed?
Yeah. It's a really good card.
Yeah, I totally understand why this card is probably the most discussed item card that came out of this whole event. It has so much utility. Mm-hmm. It does 3 different things, basically. It gives your hero raw stats, the 8 attack and 4 siege. It has a reactive ability or passive ability in a way where it will condemn units that it deals damage to. Short side note, that means that it does not condemn invulnerable targets, because it does have to deal damage to something to condemn it entirely. And then it still has an active ability which does 2 things. It condemns enemy improvements, but then it also condemns all items equipped by the equipped hero's combat target. It does so much. So it is one of the most expensive items in the game thus far, but it's so powerful. It really is. It has so much utility. It really feels like you can just put this on any hero with decent survivability, and you will be doing a lot of work on the lane.
Yeah, I still think, though, this is probably not the kind of item that is going to see play in every deck, though. Like, while it's extremely powerful and technically any deck can play it, it just feels that you are putting a 25 cost item in your item deck is a real cost, because especially something like a controlling deck, you're not going to get that much gold probably at any point in the game. If you are doing some econ manipulation stuff, I definitely think that this is a useful card to have access to and in your deck, but I think that you really have to put some effort into it in order to actually buy an item like this.
In the pack stacks, what we've seen is that most of the decks did not have many expensive items as part of their item deck. Yeah. Except, again, for the econ ramp stuff. Instead, people most of the time would get powerful items like these from the random secret shop. Yeah. And that means that that's honestly, I love that mechanic, by the way, because it puts pretty much any item on the table. It keeps things really interesting, even for your own deck. Because you may see an item pop up on the secret shop and be like, oh my god, that's actually perfect right now. Maybe I should put that into my item deck. But right now, less RNG.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Now, the last item that I want to talk about today is the Horn of the Alpha, which is the 4 health. It gives 4 health, which is, of course, what you're buying it for with the 25 gold. But what you're really buying it for is, of course, the active ability that summons the Thunderhide Pack, which is a 14/14 with Siege 6. And those technically cost 8 themselves, so this is a normal unit that exists in the game. But yeah, this is a really powerful card to have access to. That I just wanted to kind of compare this in some respects to the Apotheosis Blade, because this to me was a card that if you can put the effort in, if you do put the effort in to build your deck in such a way to amplify your gold through paydays or the Iron Fog mines or whatever, you can get something like this, and it can take over a game really quickly. I just also think that it's not a good finisher in a lot of cases, because in order to get full value of it, you really want the game to go on a couple turns. Apotheosis Blade often ends the game kind of on the spot, and if you're putting it in the correct lane, because it just like busts stuff up, and often it almost always is going to kill one hero, and can often end up killing two heroes because of its activation. This is one that you have to play it for several turns in order to really accumulate value.
Hot take coming out here. I don't think Horn of the Alpha is that good. I mean, it's like the active is it's good, but compared to price, I don't really think it's that worth it. I'm not saying it's a shitty card, but I'm just saying for the price, I would rather get something else. Like, because you asked earlier, Neon, is it really worth it to get, for example, an Apotheosis Blade instead of 3 Stonehall items? And with the Apotheosis Blade, I think it's much more worth the price than what Horn of the Alpha is. But that's just my opinion.
I'm going to give the same answer that I've been giving throughout this entire episode, which is blah, 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 situational, blah, blah, blah. Because, but that's really card games, isn't it?
Yeah.
In like a zoo deck, this is really great. Especially when you've already got a Thunderhide pack as a creature in your deck, which is what we've seen in the Pax deck, for example. There we often saw Thunderhide packs coming out on the same turn on the same lane. Because the idea is that these Thunderhide packs with their 6 siege damage will bust through that defensive line. Like, you activate the Horn of the Alpha, you play another Thunderhide pack, and you've got 12 siege damage coming through. And if there's a hole in that line of defense, you may just deal 14 with 1 Thunderhide pack alone. This is like a game finishing item if you've got the right lane lineup.
And I agree it's good, but I don't think it's as good as other items for the same price, because there's so many answers to it, and the cooldown it's not super long, but like you said, if you get Horn of the Alpha, you want some more turns. So unless you're really good, or what was I going to say? Unless you were really lucky with paydays and stuff, and you actually have the money to get it a bit early, even in the situational cases where it's good on paper, I think other items would still be better.
One of the things that I'm actually thinking about right now is that we did hear that there's going to be better attachment, improvement, and item kill in the actual game, that there'll be a little bit more that people will have access to.
More unit removal.
So this kind of card, I think, gets a lot worse there. Something like Apotheosis Blade, it does have some of those weaknesses, but you just need to activate it once and you get a lot of value from it. This card, I really think that and actually, with Apotheosis Blade, it should also be mentioned that that activated ability is really good, and as you'll probably be able to activate it multiple times over the course of the game. But the first activation is by far the best, because you deploy it into the lane that has multiple heroes or multiple improvements, and you kill all their shit. Then that shit doesn't come back next turn. Like a lot of their stuff's gone, and it's not respawning magically. So in that respect, like the activated ability value of Apotheosis Blade drops dramatically after the first activation. Well, this one, you really kind of need to get multiple activations for you to really be happy with it. Buying a free Thunderhide pack for 25 gold doesn't seem like a good deal to me.
I think the whole point is that this kind of item is most valuable in an econ ramp deck, where you can get 25 gold easy after the second round or something. And then you can get a Thunderhide pack into the game on like the third or second round already. And considering that the Thunderhide pack is usually an 8 mana card, which would be like round 6, if you can basically get ahead of the mana curve with this item, it is absolutely amazing.
Oh, yeah. It definitely is going to have moments that it shines a lot, but I think there are some very serious weaknesses there. So with that, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about a few creeps and sort of develop some of our understanding of this class of card, because this is another one that I have been learning a lot about through the time of playing TTS. And there's just a few that we'll be covering here, not the entire swath of them, but we'll be going through this probably more as more come out. But the one that I wanted to start with was Rebel Decoy. This is a 3-cost green creep that is a 2/3 and has the active ability 1, swap Rebel Decoy with another ally. This actually, I think, is really, really good, especially in the early game. I mean, obviously it costs 3 so that you can play it on turn 1. But the fact that you can line up your heroes to trade profitably with your opponent's stuff, because you can play it out and then activate it the same turn. And if that means that you've changed combat such that your hero now kills your opponent's hero, or it isn't killed by your opponent's hero, like gets it out of the way of an attack, that's really, really valuable.
Honestly, I would say that this is probably the most high value creep card we've seen so far. Like, just look at Phase Boots, just look at Cunning Plan, and keep in mind that this is a 2/3 creature with this ability. It is absolutely amazing in my opinion. And I'm personally a big fan of the voice lines from this little guy, because he does have lines depending on what's happening to him. Like, the whole deal is that the Rebel Decoy guy knows that he will leave his life on the battlefield for the cause. But if you swap him to something and it looks like he might survive it, he will actually comment on that and be like, oh, looks like I might survive this one.
Well, that's cute. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really nice.
What about the Red Mist Pillager? This is one that I know that Anger has developed some very passionate feelings on. So how about you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, okay, so everyone realizes that it's powerful because if it hits the tower, it duplicates itself and over time will exponentially do more damage, and it can take down a tower and then an ancient quite easily if the opponent doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But like Dabacabb red-pilled me on, that isn't really the most important thing about Red Mist Pillager, that you can take down a tower and ancient. One of the most important aspects of the cards is that you make your opponent have to deal with it. He has to expend so many resources on trying to shut down the Red Mist Pillager, and that is maybe what actually let Dabacabb win his game against Lumi. That Lumi spent so many cards and mana and gold on just trying to stop the Red Mist Pillagers in a game, or in a lane that Dabacabb had already won. Like, he had already taken the tower in that lane, so he didn't want to do anything more there. He was done with that lane. He just let the Red Mist Pillager do his thing. And like, just the mind games of the Red Mist Pillager is so powerful.
Yeah. It is basically a deterrent in a way. Like, you make the enemy waste resources on a lane that has pretty high defense, actually, because they have to. They have to stop the menace or it will take over that lane. But on the other hand, they're probably wasting resources on something that's actually pretty weak when it starts out.
One of the attractive features of this, too, is actually just the way in which combat and creep placement works. Is because you can choose where the creeps go. You can you say, like, okay, I'm placing the Red Mist Pillager now, and you can often do that after your opponent has spent their mana for the turn. They've positioned everything, and then you know that it's going to be attacking and hitting, and it's going to be able to duplicate that turn. This is definitely a card, though, that has a matchup problem in some respects. And maybe not problem isn't the right word, but the matchups that it's in are really important. If you're against a blue decks have a number of very powerful tools to handle it. If you're not against a blue deck, though, red decks, they kind of have to contort some play, get their hand on some cleave damage in order to take care of it once they've duplicated once. And against a black deck or a green deck, you have some very serious problems. Once they've duplicated even once, and you usually have to commit multiple cards. Otherwise, it's going to quickly chow down on your tower, then your ancient. So given that structure to the game, I think that this card is a lot better than what I initially thought. And there's a lot more opportunities to sort of sneak it in before your opponent can do anything. There are a lot of counters to it, don't get me wrong, but it's seriously scary when it gets out of hand.
Yeah, it's a good pressure tool.
So the next creep that I want to talk about is actually Savage Wolf. And this one's different because this is a hero-specific card. And this is the signature card of Lycan. And this is a card that has blown me away of how excellent it is. Lycan in general is a hero that if people don't, I don't know if people have their power rankings in their minds yet about where the different heroes line up. If you don't think that Lycan is one of the best ones, you're probably wrong. Like, it's really, really good. And Savage Wolf is a spectacular card that gains 2 health a turn, 1 attack per turn. It's a 3/3. You play it on with 4 mana. The fact that this it negates creep damage is a really important feature to it. That if it's matched up against a creep the first turn, it'll bounce off of each other. The creep will take 3 damage and the Savage Wolf will take 2, but then the Savage Wolf will functionally heal up because it gets that +2 maximum health. And this is you can't leave this guy alone. It's going to get out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is another one of those really high value creep cards. And I'd like to point out that both the Rebel Decoy and the Savage Wolf are common cards. Just putting it out there, guys. Really high value creep cards here for very little, like a high chance of getting it and very little money value to spend.
Yeah, it's a really good card, and I actually struggled against it yesterday playing with you.
Yeah, no.
You and your fucking wolves.
No, I mean, they carried the game for me in that game that we played.
Yeah.
I do hope that they carried over the wolves need no armor meme. I'd love that. That's something that he says in Dota, and then you just keep buffing him with armor.
So that is definitely a card that I think looks kind of innocuous at first glance. You're kind of like, yeah, 3/3 for 4. That seems like okay-ish, but once you actually play it, you realize that this can, like, especially against decks that don't have good targeted removal, you kind of the same thing as you do with the Red Villagers, that you place it strategically so the first turn it doesn't die and gets that bonus, and then it's going to be now in the future. From now on, it can one-shot creeps, and eventually it'll get to the point that it can contest heroes and towers, etc. So it's definitely one to watch out for.
Yeah, it's actually one of those few creeps that you may even consider putting invulnerability on.
Yeah, it's worth buffing.
Because, it is worth buffing. Because in the end, if like the enemy decides to somehow condemn that unit, then they kill the creep. Congratulations. But if you put invulnerability on it just so it keeps surviving and keeps getting that +1 attack, +2 health, that's pretty funny.
I mean, it doesn't take long, though, for it to... Like another bonus that we talked about previously is the Empower one. That's Magnus's card. That also costs 4. It gives +3 attack, +3 cleave. There are a bunch of other cards that are like this as well. These Savage Wolves are one of the few that I think we've seen so far where you're like, yeah, no, I'll buff this up, and within a couple turns, it'll be able to go head-to-head with, axes and bristlebacks or whatever. Like, it takes a little bit of work, but it'll do it.
And Lycan is so sad when they die. He's like, no, they were all I had.
Really? That's sad.
Yeah, seriously. It's really sad.
One that I haven't come up to a decision on yet of how I really feel about it is the Revtail Convoy. This is one that Cymen, of course, did briefly mention earlier. It's a 0/20 that has plus X attack, where X is half of your gold. And this is one that did see play in the Econ ramp deck, but it really feels like there's a tension with this card because it sort of asks you to not spend your gold to keep it buffed up. But gold gives you items, and items are sick. So
yeah,
I don't really know how I feel about this one just yet, especially because like if you're not putting that effort into holding a lot of gold, well, like, I mean, if you play this in the first lane, it's probably going to have like 2 or 3 attack most of the time.
How much mana
5.
is it?
5.
Well, it's good for just a tank at least, because I think what's the one, the Farvan creep? It's like 0/8, right? So maybe this could be used the same way until you have enough gold. But I agree with you. I don't know if I would like to keep my gold to use it on this creep instead of just using it on items. So yeah.
See, that's the thing. I personally love this unit because we saw so many people misplay with this that it was funny. Like it can be such a powerful unit, and honestly, for 5 mana, 20 health, that is massive. You can just keep blocking a lane for a couple turns with this, even when the hero is already buffed up. But the real strength in an Econ ramp deck really is the attack. We saw some ridiculous attack values on the Revtail Convoy. And we did see a couple games where people could have won if they had not spent any gold, but they got greedy. They got greedy, bought some high value item. They wanted to put it on the hero, and then too late they realized, oh wait, I could have killed the last turn. I think this is a very high value card that is going to see a lot of misplay. And that's really where the enjoyment comes in, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is a card that it's really hard to play this outside of a green-black deck. I really think.
Just Neon, just stick to your red decks. Just
No. I like,
you know, just keep away. Just keep it simple.
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but it feels like you're very limited into what you can do with it, and that it's only in these very specific niche archetypes that you can play something like this. And if there's some counters to that, like let's say that there's a card that allows you to steal your opponent's gold or diminish the accumulation of gold, then I feel like you're going to have some problems. And especially if there's a card that says something like, I could see a 4-cost card that says destroy or condemn, I guess is the terminology, to condemn opponent's creep that costs 5 or less. And that'll take this guy out really easily, and will punish people who over rely on big tanky heroes like this, tanky creeps like this.
I see one way I see Revtail Convoy being really strong is if combined with Shop Deed, that makes all items in the secret shop free. That way you can save up more money. But yeah, even then, I agree with you, Neon, that it's probably only viable in Econ Ramp with green-black.
I will say this. I like this card much more than the Exiled Mercenaries, because those have a similar ability, but that one's active, while this one is passive. You don't have to take care of the attack value at all. But with the Mercenaries, let me just put this card up here. With the Mercenary Exiles, that's a 2 attack, 1 armor, 4 health creep for only 3 mana, which has an active skill. But for that one, you actually spend your gold. That's the big difference. With the Revtail Convoy, you don't actually have to spend anything but the mana to summon it to have that attack value on the board. With the Mercenary Exiles, you have to spend all of your money to have half of that value become an attack value for these Mercenary Exiles. And also, they take tips too, like they round down. And we actually saw one time when somebody was very desperate, he tried to spend 1 gold on them, and it didn't buff them at all. And the mercenaries just laughed at him for it.
Now, with the mercenaries versus this, I think that's an interesting tension to bring up. And I think that part of it is that they're just very different cards in how they function. The mercenaries, to me, are an early game play that helps you trade efficiently or you get some advantage in the early game and build up a bit of a board. While this guy is a mid game tank. Those mercenaries, if you get into also a late game situation where you've bought up all of the items that you want from your item deck and you just didn't roll anything particularly good from the secret shop, you can say like, okay, yeah, I'll dump 10 gold into it and it gets +5/+5. And it also forces your opponents to play around it too, that you have 2 of the mercenary elites on a given board, and if one of them goes unblocked with that bonus, then you can win the game that way, and that can punish your opponent in various ways. So that's something that I think is more the application of that. It's kind of a split card that allows you to be aggressive in the early game and have a little bit of a hammer in the late game, while the Revtail Convoy is much more just a beefcake that you are hoping to play in the mid game, and maybe it just tanks months of damage, and maybe it will be a game winning play for you several turns down the line once you've paydayed a couple times in a row.
But just one point, the Mercenary Exiles do not only gain attack points, they actually gain health as well. So their health is variable as well. It is a really interesting card, and I love it for being so wonderfully thematic with the whole pay the mercenaries and they fight as hard as you can pay them.
Indeed. Fun. Now, were there any other cards that are in either of these categories of items or creeps that you two wanted to talk about before we finish up for the day?
I think one interesting creep that I think is probably the one that has the most value compared to price is the Bronze Legionnaire or whatever it's called. It's 2 mana. And it has 4 attack, 2 health, and 2 armor. So from creeps, it doesn't take any damage, and it deals 4 damage, so it kills creeps. And it's only 2 mana, and it's the same as the Oglodi Grunt. What's his name? Untested Grunt. Except that he has armor. They cost the same. Everything is the same, but he has 2 armor. That's so insane. Yeah,
because of the themes of the colors. That's also something that we needed to keep in mind for the last 2 creeps that we discussed, because one's green, one's red.
What about you, Cymen? Anything that we missed that stuck out to you?
Yeah, we actually did not see this card at PAX, but it has been leaked or revealed, whichever you prefer, which is the Emissary of the Quorum. And that is a neutral creep card, which means you can play it on any board, no matter what kind of hero there is.
It is a green card. We've got that from a different source.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go. Whatever. So it has 1 attack, 2 armor, and 10 health. So this one's actually pretty beefy, especially with that armor. Again, pretty much ignores creeps. That's a factor to keep in mind. But the most important part of this card is the active ability Mysterious Benefactor, which modifies, again, this buff sticks around beyond death. It modifies allies with +2 attack and +2 health. And this means that it will buff everyone on the lane, not just the neighbors, not just a specific hero or unit, all units on that board.
Yeah, I'm getting PTSD from yesterday.
Oh, yeah. All units on that board will get permanently modified with +2 attack, +2 health. Super high value. And only a 1-turn cooldown.
Yeah, the card is Absolutely spectacular. In certain situations is a good way to put it. I don't want to generalize it too much because it is something that 8 is a lot, and especially if you don't have any other creeps in the lane, she just doesn't do anything. Like she doesn't help you really come back from a lane that you're losing, but she does really help you snowball a lane that you're ahead in, which is an important factor in this game.
And I'm just looking forward to learning more about the Quorum. We've seen a little bit of them in the Pugna card back when the deck builder leaked, but we'll get into the lore some other time.
Indeed we will. But that will do it for today. Let's plug our materials on our way out the door. I, of course, did that bonus cast with Dabacabb just over the weekend, and check that out if you haven't had a chance. Be sure to subscribe to The Secret Shop on Apple Podcasts, is the name of it now, and then Google Play Store. We're up on the Google Play Store as well. And be sure to, if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like and set notifications to make sure you don't miss anything that we put out on the channel. Anger, I know that you put out a video just today. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, the one about Dabacabb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about his game against Lumi during PAX, and he explains just how he was able to win. You know, because everyone knows he won, but how did he do it? You know, and what mistakes did Lumi make? So I think, and I learned a lot from that, because there was like a lot of hidden things I never even considered that he thought was so important, that I learned from it. And he's just a really cool guy.
What about you, Cymen? What's up with the Artificers Guild?
The Artificers Guild has released several videos since we last talked. One of them is a gameplay analysis of one of the more lengthy games of the eHome Pro Linso against Sunsfan, and Divok dusted off his casting skills for that one. So if you want some in-depth analysis, that is the video to watch. And we also have another hero preview for you, this time a hero that we have not seen in action yet, Skywrath Mage. So look forward to that. It's already out, you can watch it, as thousands have done before you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much for your support. Lovely to hang out with all of you today. And I'll chat with you all later.
Peace.
Thank you. Thank you for your business.
God damn it. Let me repeat that. We're gonna edit this out. Fucking falling over my words. I'm sorry.
It's on the tape, man. It's mine.
No, stop. You know what? You can put that at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
Let me.
Hey, man, I put it where I want. It's on the tape. It's fucking mine.